So the saying goes, the future is not set. There is no fate but what we make for ourselves. And when it comes to the Terminator franchise, they definitely made their own fate. So I recently saw Terminator Dark Fate, and it stars Linda Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Gabriel Luna, Mackenzie Davis, and Natalia Reyes. And it wouldn't be enough for me to say that I have some grievances with the film. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you kind of my thoughts about what I think the movie could have done, alongside sharing elements of the movie that I just did not care for. And I just want to warn you, there's going to be heavy spoilers in this movie, but if the box office currently is anything to go off of, the people that have wanted to see it have already seen it, and it's not a lot of people. And I think part of that had to do with a spoiler that leaked months before the movie dropped, and one that just infuriates the Terminator fanboy within me, and that is killing John Connor in the opening of the film. That's right, John Connor, who was almost a central character in Terminator 1. I mean, it was obviously his mother that needed protecting, but the figure, the idea of John Connor just loomed over the film. And in Terminator 2, we got to see young John Connor, and even in the beginning of the movie, is sort of a flash forward to the future, the older John Connor, who's scarred up, battle-worn, the leader of the Resistance. And so he has to send a Terminator back in time to keep himself safe so that the T-1000, played by Robert Patrick, does not kill him. And of course, we get not only one of the best action films of all time, but also one of the best sequels, if not the best sequel to a movie ever. And after watching those first two movies, we get to know these characters. We love these characters. We want them to succeed. And in Terminator 2, they do succeed. They stop Judgment Day. They blow up Cyberdyne. Skynet never exists. But they still felt the need to kill him off. And much to my dismay, finding out that it was James Cameron's idea, the same man who to this day criticizes David Fincher and 20th Century Fox for killing off Newt and Hicks at the beginning of Alien 3 for seemingly no other reason than David Fincher or the writers or whoever just didn't want to deal with those characters. And this scene very much reminds me of what Kylo Ren tells Rey in Star Wars The Last Jedi. It's forget the past, kill it if you have to. From here on out, John Connor is no longer the focus of the story. Which comes to my first major change that the movie could have taken, an alternate route. And that is to say that after the destruction of Skynet, John Connor's destiny is no longer to lead the Resistance. And the best course of action is to make the alternate ending of Terminator 2 the canonical ending. And that's you have old Linda Hamilton sitting on a bench watching John with his kids. The Connors did their part, they get their happy ending. But then I know some are gonna say, well, no, you have to kill John Connor because you gotta give Sarah Connor the motivation to be in the movie. Which brings me to my second change, and that's actually omitting Sarah Connor and Arnold Schwarzenegger, aka the T-800, from this film. You are a new creative team, you need to come up with something different. You want your new characters to stand out, but it is really hard to make new characters stand out when you have the older characters next to them constantly outshining the new characters. I'm not gonna lie, Linda Hamilton eats up the screen in whatever scene she's in with Mackenzie Davis and Natalia Reyes. And then later in the movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger eats up those scenes and outshines everybody, which makes me want to see more of these two and less of the new characters. So the whole idea is Terminator 2 ended the Connor story, just cut it. Just cut them out of the movie altogether so that we can just focus on these new characters. Because since it's a different future and it's a different AI, that's what we should be focusing on. And now we have to justify a Legion, because Skynet becoming self-aware, destroying the world, making Terminators, okay, we know that story, we get that story. But you're telling me another AI with completely different code made by a completely different company decides to do the exact same thing, it's just a little far-fetched. So the thing to do would be to have some kind of connection between Skynet and Legion. So you could have a story where there were these two companies, Cyberdyne and Company B, and they were both vying for a military contract to create the next big military-grade artificial intelligence that is going to lead the US military and cybernetics department into the future. And of course, Cyberdyne gets that contract, so they start developing Skynet, but the events of Terminator 2 Judgment Day happen, which means the contract automatically defaults to Company B, and they're allowed to build their Legion artificial intelligence, which is then given to the US government upon completion and implemented within their system, which would also solve the equation of how did a completely different AI built by a completely different company come up with the exact same designs for Terminators? And that's when we do pull from Terminator 3. As we see in Terminator Dark Fate, it does pull from some of the sequel films. You make the Terminator design the government side, their cybernetics division. That way, when Legion interfaces with the government's system, it downloads everything and fixes that problem altogether. So we say that it wasn't just necessarily Skynet that became self-aware, it's when Skynet interfaced with the government systems. So it would make sense if you plug a similar software into the government systems, a similar effect would happen. Only since Legion was created later, the timetable of Judgment Day gets pushed back. And then of course we go through the motions, we get the introductions to our Terminator, the Rev 9, as well as Grace coming from the future. The only difference I would make in this case is that Grace would be completely human. She would not be augmented at all. And I do this because making her human would up the tension factor, as this is a machine from the future that she cannot go toe-to-toe with. So we would get to see her military tactics, her intelligence, as she has to try and maneuver around this new killer Terminator. Because even though the Rev 9 can split itself and heal from any damage, seeing Grace being able to just kind of throw them around, beat them down until they can scurry away, does make the Rev 9 seem like less of a threat and just more of a nuisance that they have to contend with from time to time. This would also remove the subplot of Grace constantly needing drugs and medication when her metabolism burns out, because this one weakness inhibits her ability to properly protect Danny. Because every time we saw her crash after a fight, it is quite possible that if the fight had gone on any longer, she could have crashed during the fight, in which the Rev 9 would have just killed her. The movie will then, of course, progress. We still get Danny, get her introduction. We get Grace to Danny. We get the fight that ensues, where they just barely escape, but they do get away. So Grace and Danny, they're now on the run. The Rev 9 is going to be hot on their trails, losing them from time to time, but always still finding a way back. And then while they're on the run, we'll get a scene from Danny where she wants to run away. She tries to run away, but Grace, she stops her. And we'll get a moment where Grace is at her most vulnerable. She drops to her knees as she's finally taking the time and soaking in the environment around her, as she's seeing the trees, the grass, the birds, the people. And it would also play from a standpoint where she was born into the terrifying future instead of something that she lived through. It would bring a lot of emotion to the scene as she's looking at Danny, telling her where she's from. All of this is gone. There's nothing left. It's a barren wasteland of just death and destruction. And this would be similar to a deleted scene in Terminator 1, which after seeing that scene, I have no idea why they took it out of the movie. I thought it was a very good scene. And it's something for the Protector to let the protagonist know that the stakes are a lot higher than they believe. And Grace will tell Danny, I can protect you, but you have to trust me. Danny will of course stay, and it's also right around this time that Danny will even ask Grace, can you teach me how to shoot a gun so I can at least be a little more useful? And then this is the start of Danny's transformation of sorts, as she's really starting to take in the situation and she begins learning how to handle firearms, something that's going to also take some time, and we'll see over the course of this entire trilogy, because this is going to be a trilogy. Because the scene where Danny is learning to shoot and she's just automatically good, That just does not work. There are so many fundamentals to handling a firearm that it's something you just can't learn in the matter of seconds just because somebody whispers something in your ear. Like Sarah Connor is another great example of an organic transition between a woman who was just at a diner and then something had her life turned upside down to the awesome badass that we got in Terminator 2 who knew how to fight, how to handle weapons, and in essence turned herself into a human Terminator. The movie will continue. Grace will attempt to get Danny to what she was told was a safe house, but little do they know the Rev 9 is posing as Danny's father and had contacted the police. They put out a full APB on Grace as well as Danny, and the two are inevitably captured. They are detained. They call the Rev 9, the Rev 9 comes in, we get another big action sequence, only this time the encounter is even closer than before as Danny actually does get wounded. Grace does manage to get her out though, where Danny blacks out from blood loss. But she's fine because Grace is not only trained in combat, but also trained in field medicine. So Danny will wake up feeling kind of lousy, that's twice now that Grace has had to save her, and even starts to wonder what is so special about her anyway. Why is the Rev 9 after her? Because she seems and feels really useless. And this is where Grace then drops the bombshell that Danny is the future leader of the resistance against Legion. This is where Grace fully opens up to Danny and tells her that you're the one that found me when I was a child, you're the one that raised me, you're the one that trained me. When someone had the opportunity to come back and protect you, I wasn't picked, I volunteered. Because you did so much for me, I wanted this chance to do something for you. But we're going to do it without the flashback, or in Danny's case, flash forward. And because we're not seeing Danny in the future as this great leader or starting the resistance, we're allowing our minds to kind of think and decide what that is going to look like. How is she going to transform from how she is now into a great military-styled leader? And that way we don't have to see Danny like 40 years in the future looking relatively the same age. Just a little makeup with some wrinkles on it. It would have been fine. But nonetheless, the movie still kind of comes to a climax in a very similar fashion where Danny asks Grace, how do you fight these things in the future? Grace will tell her, oh, we use EMP grenades because we were able to get some of their tech, reverse engineer it, and develop something to fight them with. But unfortunately, we cannot do that here. And we have some kind of Deus Ex Machina kind of scenario where they come across a device that's a little larger than they expected, but it'll still do the trick. But then the Rev 9 will throw a fork in their plan, and it's at the end where Danny comes up with the solution. She figures out a way to make the EMP device go off just before the Rev 9 is able to kill Grace. And since this is a trilogy, we do want these characters to live, so Grace does not die at the end. She does live. Her and Danny emerge from wherever the final battle with the EMP took place, and now everything's calming down, maybe the sun's rising, and it's in this moment where Danny asks Grace, is there a way to maybe stop Legion before the bombs go off, before the invasion occurs? Grace will tell Danny, I don't think there is, but Danny will tell Grace anyway, we have to try. And then it'll fade to black, the Terminator theme will start to swell up, and that completes the first part of a 3-part story. And that's just kicking around ideas with the story as is. There are, of course, other ideas that could have been presented, other avenues they could have gone forward to. Like, for example, we get told in Terminator Dark Fate that every few years, a Terminator comes in, despite Skynet being gone, but yeah, the Skynet Terminators are still coming through. And that in and itself could have been a third movie as John and Sarah are dealing with the remnants of Skynet. Because not only do they have to defeat these Terminators as they come, they also have to make sure that they completely wipe them out, not leaving any traces behind that any big tech company could get their hands on, and once again start development with Skynet or another AI program. But something like that would most likely only be able to be a single movie, and that's not what these studios are wanting with the Terminator franchise. And I feel like a smaller scale movie like this would have been just a little easier to swallow with the audiences as they're seeing something both familiar and kinda new. Familiar in terms of the general story, but new as in we're seeing a new Terminator, we've got new characters, we've got a completely new AI program to learn about, we learn about the government's involvement in that. And by focusing specifically on Danny and Grace, we can develop those characters further and not having to rely on cameos from past characters in order to try and sell this movie. Because that's what a lot of the marketing did. A lot of the marketing said, we've got James Cameron, we've got Linda Hamilton, we've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, and to a degree, we have Edward Furlong. And then the story leaked and we were just kind of like, that's... no. And if the current box office is any indication, the Terminator franchise is going back into the vault for probably a few years before SkyMount or Paramount or whoever has it these days dusts it off and says, let's try it again. But hopefully, if they do, they think to go smaller and more personal. But those are just my personal thoughts. What did you think of Terminator Dark Fate if you saw it? Do you think things could have been worked around, or did the movie work for you as is? Did the death of John Connor bother you as much as it did me? Please leave your comments in the comment section below, and if you like this video, I'd love it if you'd smash that like button, share it with some friends, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and ring that notification bell for more comic book content. And if you're wondering what to watch next, consider one of these two videos. Alright, take care, have a great day, and as always, stay geeky.